Alrighty then, so welcome back to Answering Your Questions, Summer Supplemental 2. It should be like Summer Supplemental 3, honestly, because I already recorded today and that was like horrendous, so I had to take like a take 2 because I'm not gonna edit anything. I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered to edit anything. So I'm gonna hop right in because like I went over a little bit in the last take, but it was like 2 minutes, and this time just I can't be bothered to go over too much. Like I want to keep it 30 minutes or less. Initially, as you can tell from the first episode, I wanted them to be like 10-15 minutes, but I just talked too much and never shut up apparently. So back to answer your questions. Just reminding you that these are in like 4 categories. I broke them down into sort of art as a study. Or how to creatively study, art as a practice, what is creative practice like, art as life, so creative life, how we go about doing things, because a lot of things we do are different from how lay people or non-creative people go about doing things, and art as a business, how to run your art business effectively. So I think I'm trying to decide I want to answer the exact same questions as before, or just mix everything back up and do it again. But I think I'm gonna answer the same questions as before. So let's see. Take 2. What did I answer first last time? I think the first thing I answered last time was how to self-study with art elements. So I wasn't quite sure what the asker of this question meant, but I'm assuming they mean how to study with the elements of art, which seems like the most logical deduction to draw from that. And so that's what I'm going to be doing. I forgot. I was like, am I recording? Okay, I gotta make sure. I forgot for a second. I didn't see the big red button. But I have like stuff on my desk that was covering up the button, so that was really on my bad. My bad! And then I also noticed in the last recording that the background was a little too quiet, and I was worried about that, but I was like, maybe it'll be fine. And then I was like, no, it won't be fine. It needs to be able to cover up things that are happening in game. So, how to self-study with the elements of art. So the question is, it depends. Everything depends on which element. You study differently for each element. What are you doing out here? Are you guys actually learning out here? How are you learning out here? Anyway, so if you're doing color, you need to study using color. You need to study using different types of palettes. Are you using the complementary palette, split complementary, a triadic, quadratic? And I'm not gonna lie, on the last recording, I forgot all the names of all the basic palettes, and I was just so mad. I was so extra bad. My brain was just like, hey, you look like an idiot. Like, yeah, my students are used to that, but still. But yeah, you want to take time out to do that exact thing. Take time out to do a monochromatic, I said monotone last time, a monochromatic study. Take a random color, use all the tones, or use all the shades, or use the tones and the shades of that one color. Not because, it's not always the same doing a monochromatic study as it is doing a value study. A value study, you're just going from white to black. With a chromatic study, you start to get all the intricacies of that color. Like you lighten blue. Lighten blue might not come across the same way as lighting it with lighting red, or adding white to red, making tones of red. Those sorts of things you sort of only know by experience, and a lot of times you need experience to get a good idea or a good feel for how. Oh my goodness, what's happening over here? What is happening over here? Who are you people? Anyway, I know who they are. I just can't remember how to get over to where that is. So you're gonna want to study with intention. That's always the important part. You're not just going out there and doing the same thing over and over. You want to be targeted with it. If you find that you're having trouble with your studying, you need to think about how you're studying, how you're going about it. If all you're doing is painting still lifes, you're only studying part of what you need to do. If you were, say, studying form, then drawing still lifes is a great way to do that. You'll get a good idea of what the form of an apple is, so by the time you decide to apply it by, I don't know, sketching a weird character design for some Leica Studio claymation type deal, then you'll be like, oh, I want to make a character that's shaped like an apple. Okay, cool. Draw an apple. Why? You've already practiced drawing apples so much that it comes naturally to draw something that's shaped like an apple. If you're going to do line, you're going to want to try practicing with different mark making tools. You're going to try to draw the same thing in pencil, then draw it again with a paintbrush, then draw it again with, I don't know, a marker, then try it again with a crayon. You're going to want to keep playing around with what types of lines. And then let's say that you're inking something and you have the set pencils for it. 2D design, you guys have already done comics, so you understand this. But for those of you who are just in drawing one, when you're inking something, you're just taking ink usually, or something else that has a how long is it? 7 days. Ew. Yeah, do it. It'll waste resources, but I don't have any more training to do. You're gonna want to take something. Oh my gosh, it's done. I didn't know it was done. I have a new library. How exciting! Anywho, so you're gonna want to take whatever you drew and you're gonna want to apply ink or some other type of I want to say black, but you can have ink of different colors. Either way, it's a very solid color, usually very dark if you want to contrast with everything else you're doing. And you're gonna want to go over your lines in a way. Oh my gosh, that's really cool. Yes, please do that. Please do that, 'cause I have like one student who's failing and needs humanities stuff. So, so I'm just gonna click off so it stops affecting my my sounds. So you want to really focus in on which element. You don't just study all the elements of art at once. You want to study them individually like we did in class. When I make your slides and preparing your exercises, I make them with the intention of making all your exercises based on what element of art that we're handling. And that helps you train them individually. You don't want to go out there and be like, oh, well, I'm just going to copy this one piece over and over and over until I get it, or do one master study over and over and over until I get it, because that's not going to help you nearly as much. What is happening over here? Person, what is wrong with you? Anyway, it's like one person failing. I'm just like panicking. I blame the game. The game makes it feel like if one person's failing, the world is ended. And it's like not that bad. Oh, they're out here. Ooh, rejected. They had to sell ice in the school store just for that. Anyway, so I have 3 new students. So when you're studying them individually, make sure you actually know what you're studying. Go back and review. Okay, what does line mean when it comes to element of art? What does form mean? What does shape mean? What's the difference between shape and form? The difference between shape and form is that shape is primarily focused on flat or 2D shapes. Those are your circles, your triangles, your squares, your rectangles. Your forms are primarily focused on 3D shapes. Those are your spheres, your triangular prisms, your cubes, your rectangular prisms. And it really depends in that case what your final product is going to be. If it's going to be like some sort of cartoon, you're going to want to think in 2D. If it's going to be a higher end cartoon or something that's going to be with a bigger budget and more sort of accurately animated, like your Invincibles, your Ghost in the Shell. I don't know why I chose that old anime. Animes in general, most animes tend to be a little bit more on the form side as opposed to like Dexter's Laboratory. Oh my gosh, everything I say is old. Dexter's Laboratory, or your SpongeBob's. There you go. Even SpongeBob has a lot of form to it. When I think about it. Or your Loud Houses and things like that. Your Fairly Odd Parents. Those things tend to be very flat, with intention. And so, paying attention to. I have more. So I don't have more again. So paying attention to your sort of how you're breaking up your exercises is important. And if you know you're weak in a particular area, you're going to want to study artists who are strong in that art area. Now, what do I mean by study? Study is to stare at their work, and there's 2 different ways in order to study, actively study, especially with the elements of art. You either take a piece of theirs, think about the elements of art, list them, and then write how they are present in their piece. That's one way of studying elements of art directly, using somebody else. But the other way of studying, which is honestly, it's just some of the advice I give a lot of people, because there's this misconception that copying people is terrible and bad for your art and all this other jazz. When in reality, what you don't want to do is copy a person's work and pass it off as your own. That is called stealing. We don't steal, but we do study. We study people a lot. So find a piece of work that you find has these elements working the way that you think they should, or working harmoniously, or even someone that you're studying because you want to draw a bit more like them without copying them. And then when you're studying them, you copy them. We do this, like, in higher art education, you do this all the time when you're doing things like, you'll see it a lot, especially in very old, like, artsy type media. They have you copying masterworks. So you're painting I'm trying to think of it. Let's say you're repainting a Rembrandt, or you're repainting a John Singer Sargent. That's a master study. You are studying a masterwork, someone who's a master in their field, in order to get better in that same field. You can do the same thing in any field. That's literally all you're doing, is doing a master study. You're studying somebody who's already successful in their field in order to understand how they do it. There are so many things about art that you do not understand until you study somebody who's already dealt with and has a piece that has powered through the problems that you are experiencing. So when I do things like, let's see, what was my example I had? I have lots of art books. Lots and lots of art books. One, because I like art books, and because I like them, they add a general level of happiness to my room. I see, like, ooh, that art book looks cool. I want to see that. That's exciting. That's inspiring. It's inspiring when you have art around you all the time, which is why I tell you guys to decorate your environment. And if you feel like you're having problems with color as far as your element of art, put stuff up around your room that is colorful. Surround yourself with color. Allow yourself to experience and be tactile with color. One thing that I have on my desk is sometimes I collect LOL dolls, because they just, for some reason, sometimes they scratch the itch. I don't understand what it is. And they have a series of all Crayola crayons. And I literally just have 3 of them on my desk. Now, they're not things that I would have made myself. They're not things I would have designed myself. But just the sort of way they've put them together, and the artistry there, and the aesthetic there is very strong. And I like to see them. It's just like, I never would have done that. But it's very cute. This one that's in yellow explores all the different types of yellows and how they come together. How the yellow complements the skin tone. And I have it beside one that's periwinkle. The periwinkle and yellow, I think they go together pretty well. What did I do? I started playing with their accessories. Let me exchange those accessories. How am I playing with my blue and my yellows and things like that? And then what colors don't work? Well, the colors that don't work, that doll's off by itself. It's got all its own accessories. There's no magenta on anything but there. And so these are very, not just tactile, but sort of passive visual ways of playing with that idea of color. Not everybody's into dolls. I happen to like them. They also make great drawing subjects, but some people are creeped out by them. And in that case, you just gotta find another way to sort of experience and touch. And you want to use every sense you have available to you to interact with art, because those things help influence how you create art. And also, it is never a bad idea to have more than one art gig, because I can tell you from experience, side gigs sometimes pay for college. Just throwing it out there. Let's see. Some of the more obscure elements that'll be hard to do are going to be like rhythm. For rhythm, what I had my 3D design class do is I had them listen to a song, and then I had them draw something based off of what they were hearing. I did not give them the visuals for it. I did not tell them the name for it. I had them listen and draw, because I wanted them to sort of, in the same way that you dance to a song, you just sort of feel the rhythm. When you're drawing to a song, you're doing the same thing, but in a way you're not used to. So instead of moving your feet, you move in your pencil. So that rhythm is a lot harder when it comes to stuff like that. You really have to practice repetition and things that are going to look good, because rhythm and can be a lot about repetition, and I would even go as far to say is without repetition you don't have much rhythm going on. So such a fun class to have rhythm. It's so beautifully difficult, isn't it? The other thing I did for rhythm is I showed my class a lot of animated music videos or animated music numbers from things like children's movies. And the reason for that is, once again, animated stuff set to music is inherently full of rhythm. It's kind of like the point. So you want to be able to do that as well. Did my internet just die? Oh my goodness, my internet just died. I was like, why did the music stop? And I went over here and YouTube's like, connect to the internet. It's like, it's always dying. Always dying. I have no idea what's wrong with it. So I think I've answered that question to death by now. How to study with art elements? The answer is you take each element in its own time, make pieces devoted to that one element so that you can practice that element, especially when it comes to everything else. And the other part of that is look at other masterworks, take them apart, write down how they're using it, and then replicate. Done. I think I took longer that time than this time. No, I'm 4 minutes shorter than last time. Okay, good. 4 minutes shorter. That's successful. Alright, so how do you properly price your art without overselling or underselling yourself? There's several factors to how you price. There is need. There is sort of an understanding of what skill level you have. There's materials and time. Yeah, this is going a lot better than last time. I'm not saying I should always rehearse before these, but me messing up as much as I did in that first round definitely helped. So, like, I reread the question like 5 times wrong because I couldn't pronounce it. And also, some of you guys need to work on your handwriting. Just throwing it out there. So, when you're thinking about pricing yourself, you really do have to think about what level of skill you have, because that tells you what people are willing to pay. And that's a hard thing to do because that also attacks your self-esteem. There are a lot of people who make art and their art is fantastic. Their art is very good and it speaks to the soul. But if they don't see themselves as being good, they will undersell themselves, and by a lot. You can pretty much correlate them underselling themselves to their self-esteem, unless they have someone pricing it for them. So it's very important to understand where you are in the terms of finish. How do you do that? Once again, we go look at what other artists are doing. I thought it's always the answer and I feel bad. But there is a consensus among artists that you can find when you go through and look at pricing. Unless you have artists that are just have the opposite problem of low self-esteem. They have really, really high self-esteem and low technical skill, but we pretty much see those. So the good thing about seeing what other artists are pricing at is you get to see what level of finish that they're at, so you have an understanding of, how much work must I put in to make a finished piece, which I mentioned in the last episode, looking at other artists to see what level of finish is going to be, so you know when you're done. And the other thing is because you want to see what sells, what market-wise will go, because when you are, especially if you look at people who are commercial, look at commercial artists especially, because those artists not only sell, they sell to non-creatives. And so the good thing about non-creatives is that they give you an idea of what people are willing to pay that aren't creatives. They're not that many creatives as we think. We're always thinking that we're in like competition with each other. We're really not. We're not in competition with each other, okay? Not to the degree that we think we are. But there are so many, I need people who are primarily that. Yeah. There are so many, I guess, I don't know if it's outlet or if it's just a way of thinking. I think it's sort of like maybe outlets. Either way, there's this sort of prevailing thought that you're in competition with everybody else. And that's just not true. Everybody has their own sort of unique spin on things. Now, the market might be saturated in some areas, but it's not so much so that it's just like, oh, well, You're never gonna make it. There's too many people everywhere. You're just gonna suffer on the side of the road. That's not how it is. I remember looking at a breakdown of jobs in the United States. I forget where it came from, but it was some sort of, I think, Bureau of Labor statistic. And they were literally saying, oh yeah, creatives or art-based, design-based jobs are like 1%. 1%. 1% of the population. That's so low. there's so to us there's so many of us, but to the greater world there really aren't that many of us. We really don't have to be concerned about there being too many of us. Part of it's because there are some people who could be creatives but aren't because of either societal or family pressures or things like that. But also just like there just aren't that many. If everybody was creative, there would be nothing interesting about being creative. But the thing about creatives is that we think differently. That's how we function. We just built different. Which is not a knock on people who aren't creative. It's just a statement of fact. We think differently, therefore when we make things, we make something that they wouldn't make on their own or couldn't make on their own. That's kind of how it works. That's also why a lot of creatives end up stuck in other fields. They might like those fields, to be fair, but I know, at least for myself, and I think I also shadowed somebody who was a doctor who was also a creative. But a lot of things we can get stuck in are like sciences and higher academia for things like math. And the reason being is because we're not always going to approach the problem in the exact same way, and we get creative, notice that word again, about how we're approaching things. In the same way, when you have a creative business, you must also approach it with the same energy. Not so that you're going to reinvent the wheel by any means necessary, but that you have to think what works for you is different from what's going to work for the next person, because you think differently. So when you're pricing out your art, you have to think about your materials and your time and your ability and your history. How does that all fit into your pricing? Well, if you say that it should cost me 5 hours to do this one thing, and I'm worth at least $20 an hour, and you're going to spend just those 5 hours doing just that one thing, your thing is now $100. Take it or leave it. If you're doing something very, very intricate, like a painting, especially so. Painting is a lot of arduous work. For some of you, not so much, because you're just like, ooh, it's painting. And if you're saying that you can do all this intricate work and you can do it very fast, then you're not just pricing based on your time and your materials. You're pricing based on your experience. As you get older, you'll get faster, you'll get better. And as you get older, your prices will rise. Not just because of demand, because supply and demand. Too many demands, you may raise your prices so your supply goes down, so that your demand goes down, so that people don't ask you as much if it's too much money. But a perfect example of this is the Picasso Napkin story. In the Picasso Napkin story, he's at a Paris market when an admirer approaches, asks if he could do a quick sketch on a paper napkin for her. He agrees, creates a drawing in 5 minutes, hands back the napkin, but asks for 1,000,000 francs. And then, shocked, she asks, how can you ask for so much? And she says, it takes you 5 minutes to do this. And he replies, no, it took me 40 years to draw this in 5 minutes. Why is it a fun story? I'm going to link that story too. Why is it a fun story? Because it's a perfect example of what it takes. Nobody comes out the wound being like, oh, you know what? I can draw anything everywhere all the time. Everybody, even people with talent, especially people with talent, had time and effort and practice to get where they are. And you're charging based on that as well. So if you've gone to art school, or you've been commissioning for a while, or your level of finish is the same as people who are being paid hundreds of dollars, then price yourself appropriately. Let's see. Oh, well, I made great time this time. Excellent. Did I need anything else for that? Overselling. Overselling yourself would be to sell your pieces knowing that they're not at a level of finish that they should be at. So if you have someone that has a similar style to you and they appear more finished than yours, you're overselling yourself. You just gotta be wary of that. Don't ever put out a piece that you think is like subpar. It's one thing to put out something that you think is okay and you wish you had like 18 more hours to work on it, because you're always going to have that level where you're like, I can always add something. You can sell pieces that are at, I can always add something. What you shouldn't sell are pieces that are like, man, this really needs this, but I'm not going to bother. You should never sell those. Those are not, when you're giving your customer something, you want to make sure you're giving them a piece that is worthy of having your name on it, and that is you encapsulated, because they're asking for you. They're not asking for some random junk that you're just offloading. And then underselling, once again, be aware of your self-esteem changes. Those will affect your pricing quite a bit. Oh, also, there is, it's not a terrible practice, but it is something that happens. There are some artists, I've even seen professionals doing it, who will have very cheap commissions to make quick money. Usually they call them emergency commissions, because they're usually just like, something happened, the rent is happening. I know that there was one professor I know who had to have surgery for a pet, and there wasn't time to raise money, so they undersold themselves to get high demand so that they could pay off the surgery and then do the orders. Things like that happen. And rather than taking out a loan, sometimes it is better for you to undersell yourself and make that quick money so that you can go on with life. Just make sure that you do not drop your standard for those emergency commissions just because they're emergency commissions. Those people are still paying money and they're still expecting quality, even though they're emergency commissions. Also, for those, you might want to narrow the scope of the emergency commissions so that they are something that you can churn out pretty quickly. And I think that's everything. I think I covered everything that I was going to talk about. It was only 2 questions this time, but last time it was technically 2 questions because 2 of those questions I put together. So, that is all I have for you today. And I guess I'll see you next time. It's probably going to be next week. It seems like videos are coming out weekly. I'm going to start doing exercises and whatnot at the very end of May or in June, because let's be honest, it's May. Like, I've just finished working or teaching. You guys are either finishing up finals or your last few weeks of school or something. And so none of us are kind of trying to work anything or do exercises right now. It's the most intrepid of you all. So, end of May, beginning of June, those are when you start getting those exercises in. And honestly, I might take that question to heart and give you exercises based on elements of art. Depends on how I feel, because in general, I just want to make sure you guys are practicing over the summer. That's the only point that I'm trying to make here. So, I hope all of you got your questions answered pretty thoroughly. I have more questions to answer for next time. And until next time, farewell.